Hi, welcome to Edible Natural World, the series that celebrates local small-scale farmers, artisan food makers, and all the people who bring their amazing products to market. In this episode, we're going to go visit with Matt Rubiner, a famous, highly regarded cheesemonger and grocer who practices right here in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. So let's go speak with Matt.
I knew going into this that this is a subject that I could delve into, really make a deep inquiry into, and at the end of my life, still only be scratching the surface. Well, cheesemonger, I won't attempt to remember or be able to pronounce the Old English or the Middle High French or whatever that the word derives from, but it just means a seller, somebody who gathers commodities from the market and handles them and sells them. So you have ironmongers and you have fishmongers. And cheesemonger was an expression that you see in England, and you increasingly see it around this country. But as far as I know, we were the first store to call ourselves a cheesemonger. We look at this as a trade and a traditional craft, and an old craft. Because the one thing that is most important to me is that my name is on the front door, that everything that we do here is filtered through my sensibilities and my palate. When customers come in here and they see the wild things from all over the world, that they trust us, that they understand that there is a point of view behind this, that there is a focus behind this, that there's a passion behind it, personal to me.
Yeah.
As long as I've been in this business, that's the framework in which I sell anything. But that's the traditional role of the merchant to us, is to, I sometimes put it as shortening the distance between the producer and the people who are enjoying the produce. Otherwise, it's just some distant product. We need somebody who both knows the producer or knows and trusts people who know the producer, select, edit, curate is what people seem to say these days, and bring the products in, know their story, and present that story to the customer.
Right.
And that to me is at the very essence of being a merchant, and that's why we chose that somewhat ancient name. And so the passion drives the way that we seek out products. The passion drives the way that we handle very difficult to handle products in cheese. Cheese is a mind of its own, and you have to kind of coax it. And then a passion in the way that we sell it, and a passion that has to be somewhat infectious in that customers need to know we love this. And it all keeps going back in my head to that trust thing. Like, you need to know, if you're looking at a cheese, and this is an outlier, but one of these cheeses is nearly $80 a pound. And we're not making any money off of that. That's like half of our normal markup. But it's so rare. It's made in the dozens of wheels.
What is the name of
It's called Vito Storico Rebelle. It's made in tiny quantities, way up in the Alps of Lombardy. It's all but impossible to get. We kind of have a line in. And if somebody's going to come in and look at a cheese that's $80 a pound, they need to intuitively know, without having to ask or think about it too hard, that there's a reason for that. There's a reason that the things cost what they cost, other than just some wild marking up of products, which wish we could do, but we don't. We can't. Yeah.
Right. The cheeses that you buy, are they all ready to eat? Are you doing some what's called affinage, where you're doing the ripening and if you don't mind touching on the affineur part a little bit.
Sure. So an affineur, to those of you out there who don't know, is it's a French expression. There are, the Italian expression would be stagionatura. The English expression might be maturer or ager. But an affineur, true affineur, is somebody who selects from farms or small dairies cheeses at their very young stage, before they've begun to take on what will be their ultimate character. You can take a cheese that's one of these smelly, runny cheeses, and in its early days is just like an off-white hockey puck. And it's only through the encouragement of the growth of these bacteria or molds that the cheese becomes what it is, because those bacteria in molds are actively what's ripening the cheese. And when I say ripen the cheese, I mean breaking down the proteins into their constituent parts, breaking down the fats into their constituent parts, which creates aroma, which breaks down the texture. All that said, we're not affineurs. I don't consider ourselves affineurs. That is an art and a skill that's passed on from generations. Many of the affineurs that we deal with, that we buy our cheeses from, have been in business for 150, 200 years. We're not doing that exactly. What we're doing is, especially in our cheese cave, we are storing things properly, storing cheese in a way that allows them to develop. We screw around, we take a cheese that like, this is a little too young for us. I like this with a little more intensity. I like this with a little more salt. I like this a little drier. So we'll put it in the cheese cave and we'll monitor it and we'll flip it and rub it and do what needs to be done to it. And then when it's ready to go, we'll bring it out. So in that sense, we're doing some affinage.
So I have to move on to something that's very interesting to a lot of people. Rinds. It's clear with a pecorino, a Parmigiano Reggiano, you don't eat the rind. Right. You can use it in stocks and soups. I mean, it can have a second life, but you don't eat it. But when it comes to many cheeses with colorful molds, can you eat the rind? Should you eat the rind? If you're a real sort of gourmet, do you want to eat everything?
There's no great answer. There really is not. Obviously, in the case of, say, all the cheese in front of me here, I mean, some of them are covered in wax, so you don't want to eat that. Right. Sometimes they're covered in foil, some of the blue cheeses, you don't want to eat that. The other ones are, for the most part, natural rinds, which is to say that the outside of the cheese is merely the dried out surface of the cheese. There is nothing inherently inedible about it. Except it's been in a cellar, it's been turned by countless hands. And it's going to be quite dry. The function of the rind on these sort of cheeses is to protect the cheese as it ripens. These rinds are permeable. They will allow the graceful exuding of moisture as the cheese ages, and of gases that are created as part of the ripening process, without them, the cheese couldn't develop. But generally speaking, with some diehards, most people are not eating the rinds of these firmer cheeses. If we move over here into these goat cheeses here, most of these, all the ones that are out here now, are being ripened through the activity of molds primarily, and to some extent bacteria, but molds primarily. And these are causing, the cheeses to kind of break down around the surface, and the room temperature aspect is helping that as well. Causing, because of the choice of mold used on a lot of these, wrinkle up, get kind of brainy looking. Those are considered edible. And I would say that in this case, most gourmets, most connoisseurs or whatever, will eat the rind, but many will not. But seeking the answer to your question, going through old French cheese books and trying to get an answer, you would find as many instances of somebody saying, you must absolutely eat the rind of cheese because it's an integral part of the cheese's flavor, cheese's aroma, and the cheese's texture, and the feel of the cheese in your mouth. And then you flip over to another book by an equally storied gastronome from the 18th century, who would say, you must never eat the rind of a brie or a washed rind cheese, because it detracts from, one guy put it something like, it detracts from the sublime skill of the cheesemaker. I personally, it's situational. I know enough about what's going on a rind that I'll be like, yeah, I'll eat that. Or if I'm at a cocktail party, I'm not going to be the guy picking up that brie and shaving off the rind. But often at home, I'm going to trim off that rind. For the reason, I do kind of agree that it is part and parcel of the texture of the cheese, and I think I'm probably in the slight minority in this, just my own taste, But the rind of a brie it has a flavor to it, but the flavor, from one brie to the next, there's not a whole lot of detectable differences and stuff. Where within the cheese is everything. The cheesemaker has worked so hard to make this cheese so that at its climax is just this perfect, supple to kind of bulgy to runny texture. And then when I kind of crunch all that up with a bit of crusty brie rind, to me it detracts from that.
What makes for a seasonal cheese? Because we always think of the aging process, so you'd think that there's a constant sort of beginning, middle, and end to the life cycle.
There's a lot of different ways of seasonality. There's kind of like true seasonality of a cheese, which is somewhat but not quite as acute as like the seasonality of a tomato, say, or an ear of corn. That is, 6-7 weeks out of the summer, and then it's done. With a cheese, the only things that would really govern seasonality kind of naturally would be the natural cycle, the natural lactation cycle of the animal whose milk you made the cheese. So if you're doing things in a very, very traditional way, and there's ways around this, but if you're doing this in a very traditional way, there's going to be a period of time when the cheese is, when the animals are not giving milk. So there's in many cases a true seasonality. Like, you'll remember the great, not late, but the great and no longer really existing Monterey chef, our local, the queen of Berkshire cheeses. And in my mind, having tasted many, many fresh chefs from all around the world, as good as any in the world. The cheese is kind of in retirement now, but she wouldn't make the cheese during kidding season, when either the milk is needed by the kids, or it's for various reasons not appropriate for cheese making. And so that is like an enforced by nature seasonality. And if you extrapolate from that, the aging process, so let's say the traditional aging process of a specific cheese. So sheep are the same way. Cows, not so much. You can kind of manipulate them a little better. But with a goat or a sheep, there's going to be a period, unless you've done some, kind of advanced husbandry, which you can do, separate the herd a little bit, spray paint some of them pink, some of them green, change the light in their barn a little bit so they're convinced the season's off by a couple days, and so you can straddle that season where they're just not giving milk. But there are going to be times when that cheese is not available, and then if it's a good cheese, it'll probably sell out before the next season starts. So there'll be a chunk. Right. So that's actual imposed, and then there's a seasonality in terms of kind of quality. And I guess this is akin somewhat to like a tomato. You can grow a tomato somewhere all year round, but there are certain cheeses that are going to be different, maybe not better, but different depending on when you have them. And again, that has to do, this is an agricultural product, it has to do with where you are in the lactation cycle of the animal. Is this a time of the year when the fat is very condensed and rich? Or is this or not so much? Is it spring when these pasture-raised animals are eating, the first sprout of grasses and the fresh wildflowers? That will create a cheese of a certain character. Like on Parmigiano Reggiano, they would always say that cheeses made in the spring are the most aromatic. And it's true.
And that can be captured and distilled in that moment, like frozen.
Oh my God! If you open up
for the cheese for forever.
Yeah, if you open up a Parmigiano made in April, a good Parmigiano made in April, and you open it in the traditional way, Parmigiano is never like sliced; it's always broken with these special tools. It's cut more like a diamond than it would be whatever doesn't cut like a diamond. And when you cut it, when you break at the rind the first time the cheese splits open, you get this overwhelming, like almost tropical fruit, pineapple-y, passion fruity aroma. Just incredible. But the fall cheeses, which is pretentious, but that I prefer, what the Italians call the settembrini, the ottombrini, the cheeses made in September and October. That's when the animals are eating the kind of the first hay, the flowers are gone, the fresh grass is gone, and now they're they're beginning to eat the hay, which is incredibly concentrated in nutrients. And those cheeses tend not to be as kind of boldly aromatic, but they tend to be sweeter. And you kind of know that, and people seek them out. Like anytime I order a Parmesan from somebody, whether it's a distributor as a fill-in kind of for that week, or whether I'm in contact with the maker or the ripener in Italy, I'll always say, hey, if you got any September cheeses or October cheeses, I'd love one, because they're my favorite. You can look at these cheeses, just like we were saying before, from a scientific perspective, from a geological perspective, a cultural perspective, a religious perspective. I mean, you can look at it in every angle. It's this multidisciplinary little kind of nugget that just tells you so much. It's just this little distilled history.